Okay, hello and welcome everyone to Conversations at the Edge with Levi, Darger, and Christian Wood. We're going to be talking on the topic of the silliness of the self-help industry. And other than you and I just having a little casual chat to check out whether the system is working, we haven't really delved into any bullet points or anything on this. So I'm just excited to see what you have to say on this and where this is going to go. And you know, roughly speaking, you know, we put a 30-minute cap on it, but we'll just kind of see how things roll. So Levi, tell us all a little bit about you for those who might not already know you.
Oh, geez, where do I start? There's so much. So, yeah, if you
how would you like how would you like the world to see you in your true magnificence?
That I'm a mess. I would like the world to know I'm a mess.
Oh, you okay? Well, I'm sure people in your life already know that. A magnificent mess.
Magnificent.
That's good.
Mess,
well.
Yeah.
Well, you know, one of the things, I'm putting you on the spot. We're both on the spot here, but one of the things I've noticed with a lot of your posts is, there's a lot of really incredible, authentic dialogue around what you're truly experiencing and engaging others to really dialogue about the real stuff rather than just image projection. You know, certainly a lot of people in the coaching world, in the spiritual world, and the motivational world, there's a lot of image projection that goes on, and like I've watched you become more and more authentic, and that's awesome to see. So tell me more about that. What's going on for you?
Yeah, absolutely. We touched very, very lightly on it right before we went live, and yeah, it's like I'm the same way. Like I know a lot of people in the coaching world and the spiritual world, and I've had the chance to work shoulder to shoulder with some people. I've actually had the chance to work as a facilitator for some of those people, and I've had the chance to kind of see behind the scenes, if you will. And I love the way you put it. It's image management is really a common theme in the world, and not just with coaches and spiritual leaders, but I really think with everybody. Like that's the thing. If you're an entrepreneur, if you're anybody who's trying to be somebody, there's this thing that we do where we try and paint this image of who we want to be seen as. Just like you asked me the question, who do you want the world to see you as?
Right. It was kind of a trick question.
and it's like, me. I want the world to see me. I want the world to know me, and I want the world to be able to experience all of me and learn to accept and embrace all of me the way that I'm learning to accept and embrace all of me, because that's really what it's about. I mean, that's what image management really is about. Yeah. Is that there are these pieces of ourselves that we go, yeah, this isn't acceptable, or this isn't appropriate, or this shouldn't be, seen. And the result is that looks and they go, oh, I'm supposed to have all my shit together, and I'm supposed to be perfect, and I'm supposed to, have this Facebook perfect world. And what I've found is that what that actually leads to is greater isolation, and people feeling like there's something wrong with it. There must be something wrong with me because I don't, I struggle to get out of the bed in the morning, and I don't have my perfect routine figured out, and I'm not, rocking it in all these areas. So I must be fucked up somehow. I don't know if this is an R-rated show, but every once in a while.
No. Swear as much as you want. No, I mean this is called conversations on the edge. So wherever that edge goes, and I think that's kind of like we've talked a little bit about also you're doing your own dialogue exploration with people. And I think what's incredible with this is, like, I don't know what you're going to say. You don't know what I'm going to say or what I'm going to ask. And that facilitates that authenticity, because, you know, it's not scripted. Yeah. And, you know, part of the process is not just exploring the topic, but it's actually showing people what does it mean to show up authentically. And like the conversation I had with Amanda a couple of weeks ago, you know, and her and I haven't even met in person. You and I have, you know, had a chance to get to know each other a little bit, but with her, we just jumped in and, you know, very edgy topic, you know, like depression and suicide. You know, a lot of people don't have really solid connections to have those kind of conversations. So it's not just the topic, we're actually modeling, you know, what does it mean to just have a conversation about difficult things?
Okay. Yeah. And you know, even in the course of the conversation, I mean, there's always, you know, there's an awareness, right, that for both of us that, hey, people are watching.
Yeah.
Right. So
yeah.
that awareness creeps into the conversation, and it colors the way that you and I dialogue with each other. And to a certain extent, I mean, unless you're, you know, Yogananda or somebody, I mean, I'm guessing that everybody's going to have a certain amount of persona and a certain amount of those things that creep in, and that's okay. Like, I think that's part of the whole point of this, is being able to say, hey, it's okay. It's okay to not be perfect. It's okay to have even these pieces here. So I think there are degrees of authenticity. I think, you know, you can kind of look at it as in, there's the authentic self, and there is what is projected to the world. And, you know, I mean, psychosis is like an extreme misalignment of those, right?
Yeah.
But everybody's trying to get more and more into this place of alignment where what is being expressed is actually the truest and most authentic piece of ourselves. And I think that's a moving target. Yeah. And it always will be, you know what I mean?
So an interesting question comes up around that. So you were talking about persona, right? You know, what seems like can happen is if one gets an idea of what it means to be authentic, you could try to create that, which would just be a new form of persona. So maybe the problem isn't so much having a persona, it's, are you acknowledging that you have a persona? Are you aware what your persona is doing, and how much are you managing that, and how closely aligned is it with your authentic self? So it's not get rid of a persona, it's acknowledge the persona. And if there are problematic aspects of the persona you are projecting and there's misalignment, you know, acknowledge and correct that if it can, you know, if you can. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I love the, you know, everything that comes along with that. It's a beautiful, beautiful idea. And I think along with that, like the first thing that comes to my mind is a huge part of the process is acceptance, right? Like we're in such a hurry to try and fix and correct when we recognize, oh, okay, I'm in persona, and then it's like, oh, I got to stop being in persona, right? But that's just another persona. I mean, that's the fixer persona, and I've found myself fixing my fixer many times, right?
Man.
So I think it's really just this practice of trying to find the acceptance for who you are in this moment, and at the same time being willing to explore who am I, which I think is really the fundamental question of life, right? I mean, there's this, I like to look at it as like there's this series of almost a hierarchy of questions. And a lot of us are out there trying to figure out, you know, what should I be doing, or how should I be doing it? But prior to what, we really get to understand why am I here?
Yeah.
If I understand why, then I can get more clarity on what, and so on and so forth. But even prior to why is that question of who, like, who am I really? And who am I is that in itself is an ever evolving thing. It's like, you don't just answer that question once. Oh, I'm source. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to live the rest of my life from this idea that I'm source. Like, who am I in this moment? Who am I? Well, I'm who am I as being informed by and shaped by everything in the universe, and especially in my immediate environment, right? So the who right now is being shaped by the fact that I'm not only in conversation with you, but I'm aware that we're live. And I also happen to be in the backyard of this beautiful house in St. George, Utah, and it's pretty hot outside. Like, all of those things are shaping who I am in this moment. And so one of the tools that I've found, this is Christopher John Stubbs, that is actually how you and I met.
Yeah.
And
love that guy.
Me too. He's like a brother. And I've learned massive amounts in working with him and beside him, and in so many different ways, and just amazing guy. So, but the point is one of the tools that I got from him was this idea, this principle of looping, right? Like looping my awareness, and just constantly like looping outwardly into what's going on, into this conversation, into you, your energy, the energy of the world around me, and looping internally at the same time with my breath. What am I noticing? What am I feeling? And finding a way to connect with that deeper who, which is just, that piece beyond words, I guess.
So can I jump in for a second there? So what's interesting with tools, so you just described some amazing tools for tuning into that internal awareness and external awareness of like having a sense of what's going on inside and outside. But the question comes up in my mind is, and tools are really powerful, but what comes to mind is, what does it really mean to be truly authentically yourself if you're having to monitor all the time, like, who am I? Like, I mean, it's one of, and this is maybe one of the tricky things of like the spiritual path and self-help, is we usually are drawn to that because something isn't working, so we want to improve something. But can we get so fixated on improving and monitoring ourselves that we, by doing that, although we initially become more aware of ourselves, now we're in a habit of constantly monitoring? Because like when you watch children or animals, like when there's a certain kind of a being state that happens where someone's just so being themselves that it's not that they're unaware, but they're just so in the authentic state of expressing and being themselves, and not having to monitor themselves. Like, so not as a criticism, but like, hey, what do you think of that? Like, how does that play into this?
Yeah, and you bring up a great point, and I appreciate that, because to me, I think the essence of it is just like any tool, right? Yeah. Like, you use a tool for what it's made for, right?
Right.
So if I try and eat dinner with a hammer, that's not going to work so well. But using a tool like that, I think, has its value as a means of getting myself out of my head. Because if I'm monitoring, I'm up here.
Right.
If I'm monitoring, I'm trying to figure stuff out. I'm in my head. I'm in my thoughts about it. So looping isn't so much about monitoring for me. It's actually a presencing tool. It's actually a way to get out of the monitoring, out of the thinking, out of figuring it out, and getting into what is actually going on in my body.
So it's more of I guess what would be the word? It's more about really tuning into to the feeling state, not so much a mental monitoring, but
maybe it's a better word. Disengaging up here, disengaging the
right. So you're
being, like you're talking about.
So maybe a good word is noticing. Does that feel like to really notice? And I just had this lovely conversation with someone last night, who I think is actually listening in and watching right now. But we were talking a little bit about, this whole issue of, oh, you know what? It's funny. So this is total authentic moment. Like I started to remember what I was going to talk about, and I just blanked out. Wow. Hello, everyone. I just blanked out. I don't remember what I was going to say. Oops. So there you go.
Brain fart.
Yeah, the persona, there was a glitch in the persona, and my mind just went boop, boop. So, but, that's one of those things of like in life, if we're trying too hard to actually keep our persona together and having to uphold that, it can be like a moment like that can be like, oh my God, I fucked up. But it's like, oops, I don't know. It'll come back to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And like the whole, what just came up for me is like the whole idea of everybody's out there. The big buzzword is authenticity, right? Like, be authentic, be authentic. And part of what we're getting on here to have a conversation about, we talk about like is the label, the silliness of the self-help industry.
Yeah.
And it's funny because there is a certain amount of like an air of superiority and I'm the one I get to say I'm the one that threw that title out there, not you. Like I threw that.
No.
Just everybody's watching. It's not him. It's me. And there is kind of an air of superiority with that. But even so, it's kind of a tongue-in-cheek thing because I catch myself in it all the time, and I think that's part of like that is part of the journey. Like if you're going to step up and say, okay, I'm going to be this beacon in the world.
Yeah.
And you want to embrace to put a certain kind of spin on it. You want to embrace your Christ self, right? You want to embrace your essence or whatever. Then you've got to be willing to embrace and face into your antichrist self. For lack of a better term, right?
Okay, that's edgy. So I'm very curious about your antichrist side now. Oh man,
I'm gonna go do some seances later on.
Yeah, you do that.
But it's kind of this I'm using certain lingo, but you can slap any kind of terminology on it that you want. But the point is that if you're going to pursue this path of any kind of a path, then there's a certain amount of accepting all of the stones and all of the stumbling blocks and all of the ditches and the obstacles on that path, and being willing to say, yep, I tripped on. In fact, and I think this really is the most helpful kind of guide, if you even want to be a guide, is the kind that says, whoa, I just tripped on that rock right there. That stubbed my toe really bad. Hey, watch out for that rock right there. Right. That hurt. Right. But at the same time, like, why are we so afraid?
So you just dropped out a little bit there, Levi, so I didn't hear the last sentence.
I said, why are we so afraid to let people see that we struggle? Like, why do we have this idea that if I'm a mess, I can't be a miracle at the same time?
So, we're afraid to not be loved. We're afraid to not be accepted. So, I mean, that isolation, that you talked about earlier, and certainly as someone who's experienced a lot of depression, I mean, I know, like, depression as well as being naturally an introvert, it can be so hard to trust that you're safe with people, like, when you're that mess. And I think that's a big part of this is, like, is it safe to be yourself? Is it safe to be authentic? And certainly a lot of us have experienced how unsafe it can be, and not imagined, like, really unsafe. So it's not like, sometimes in the self-help industry, people talk about getting out of your story, but if you have legitimately been unsafe, whether that's physically, sexually, emotionally, or a whole host of different ways in which that could happen, that's a very real thing. And I cringe a lot of time when there's a kind of shaming around, like, you shouldn't still be bothered by something that you were traumatized by. I mean, that's a terrible approach to this. And so a lot of times people have a terrible fear, like, even as they're progressing wonderfully on their path and they're doing better in so many areas, and then maybe they have kind of a flashback or something triggers them, and then there's a real fear of, like, I can't tell people this because that's going to make me unlovable, because I remember when I was vulnerable before and I got attacked for that, or whatever actually happened. But I think that compassion for others and what they are experiencing, it seems to me, in my own experience, like, the more compassion I have for myself and my messiness and my imperfection, it seems like it's easier for me to extend that same understanding to other people. How has it been for you in that arena?
I'm resonating deeply with everything that you're saying, because this is exactly, like, in the work that I do, when I facilitate an event or anything of that nature. In fact, these are conversations that we have with the groups and the people that come in that we facilitate for us. Is basically, it's like, hey, like, part of our job here is to co-create a space of safety, and I always emphasize co-create. Like, it's not my job to make you feel safe. It's our job to create this space of safety for us to be able to dive into our pain and dive into those stories and dive into all of the things that hurt, because there's a reason why it hurts. Yeah. And there's a very legitimate reason why it hurts. And even if it was something that happened when you were 4 years old and has never happened since, it hurts. Yeah. And it's and that gets to be acknowledged and recognized and understood and appreciated. And there's this fine line in all of it, I think, of this balance, if you will, of creating a space that helps people to source their own safety. Mm-hmm. But it's not just about sourcing your own safety and sourcing your own well-being. Right. That's something that's part of what we need community for. That's part of what we need each other for. And right. And so like, I find that, to be able to share things that previously in the past have been extremely shameful and extremely, things that I never shared with anybody. And I have the ability now to share those things and share them with the world. And there's no energy, there's no charge around it for me anymore, because I've been able to the stories get created, right? So there's a lot of things right now that have been touching these pain points for me and triggering things for me where I've actually had to I've been on both sides of the fence with my siblings, where I've said, hey, I need space and I need some safety from you right now. And right. Actually giving myself permission to acknowledge that I felt unsafe was huge. Like I never actually allowed myself to admit that I felt unsafe with somebody. But also on the other side of the fence, like I've had people who have felt like they needed to put, in speaking of my siblings specifically, felt like they needed to put distance between me because they interpreted any of my, which for me are just genuine attempts at connection. But I have recognized that there's a tendency, especially in my family, to delegitimize your need for safety because I'll say, you should be over that, or
Right.
like, what the fuck is that, and yet the reality is that whether it's legitimate or not, the pain is real, their need for safety is real, and that should always be honored and always be respected.
Right.
And I don't, I find myself not always honoring that with my siblings, and catching myself and going, wow, I'm actually violating this person that I love.
Right.
And trying to force intimacy and force connection.
Right.
Where they don't want it right now.
Right.
And so I think all of us have like these different areas and these different levels or different spaces that we're kind of coping with that stuff on one level or another. Uh-huh. And for me, it's mostly around family of origin. Like there's not a lot of stuff that comes up with the average person anymore.
Yeah.
And so,
well, thank you for sharing all that. I mean, that's probably very important for people to hear. Like, this is a messy process. I mean, even with, there tend to be more triggers within the family dynamic than others. That's our family of origin, as you said. Well, that's our formative years have been shaped around those experiences. And one of the things that I think is so important. I mean, I love the sciencey stuff around trauma and brain science and all that. There's some really interesting clues that pop up when you start to look at the science. And one of the things is, we think of trauma, we think of even emotions as an ephemeral thing, so a disembodied thing. Like, it tends to be like idea-based, right? Rather than the acknowledgement that, pain and trauma exists in the body. It's not up here. We do also have stories and ideas and conclusions about what it meant, why it happened, how to fix it. Like, well, that's going on too. But because the truth of the matter is, like, when we're triggered, the trigger happens long before we have a thought about it. The trigger actually arises in our body as a physical sensation. Yeah. And, having that compassion for self, like acknowledging, like, wow, I am feeling these really intense things in my body. Now, coming back to what you said about that, looping our awareness, I mean, if you automatically feel that and then go to, you have your go-to conclusions and reactions that, well, this person in front of me said something and now I'm feeling this, so it must be because of what they've said and it must be because of them. Because who is the person we actually feel the most unsafe around? Guess who that is? We actually feel that is the person we feel the most unsafe with. And certainly not to discount any other people who have harmed us or hurt us in legitimate ways. But, we are ourselves all the time. We're around ourselves all of the time. When we can have a really good relationship with our own self and even a good relationship with our own experience, right? Because you're talking about, like, your family delegitimizing each other's experiences. Well, where does that start? Delegitimizing our own experience. I shouldn't be feeling this. Why am I not over this, right? And especially as people who have been on the spiritual path, and God knows, only knows how many workshops we've been to and books we've read.
Yeah.
Meditating for 100 times, it would be clear of all that shit. And so on and so forth. Like, even that drive, okay, this kind of gets into that like self-help thing, the silliness of that. There's that idea, if I could just create a better self, that will be a more acceptable self, and then I could stop judging myself. And then I'd actually be safe to be around me. But it's kind of the other way around. Be the safest person to be around in all circumstances, because you can't control external circumstances, and you can't even necessarily control your internal experience. There's a fantasy that we can, and there's like this idea, like if I just got clear about all my stuff, and I purged this and cleared that and healed this, and then suddenly we're going to have a pristine internal experience. But there is that idea, I shouldn't be feeling this.
Yeah, and I want to jump in there, if I may, real quick.
Yeah, please do.
You talk about like the need to, we have this fantasy that maybe we can control our internal experience. And if we really start to understand where that internal experience arises from,
wait, you have an answer to that? Because that is like the mystery of life. Tell me, where does it come from?
You've got this jumble of existence that since the moment that you emerged into the world, you've got this jumble of existence, that all of that and everything, the entire universe is coming together to shape that. And so it's absolute insanity to think that you can somehow control that, unless somehow you become so Buddhically enlightened that you connect to source itself, and then you are the universe, and then okay, awesome, control your experience if you can. But I haven't ever got there, and I don't know anybody who has. So what if instead of trying to control that internal experience, we can't control it, but we can accept it? Right. And we can appreciate it even. We can find appreciation. Like that's been one of the biggest game changers for me, is discovering that just the simple act of finding appreciation does actually shift the nature of the experience.
So what comes to mind as you're sharing that, that's a really beautiful way of putting it. And what came to mind is, for those who are like people who love being out in nature, a lot of people describe the kind of awe that happens when they're out in nature and seeing the beauty of the world, creation, regardless of what your belief structure is. If you just go into nature and you're like, oh my God, this is amazing. Look at the life. Now, what if, taking that appreciation and acceptance even one step further, what if you could just look inside and be in awe of the mystery of, I don't actually know how I came to be. I don't actually know how I am the way I am. That's actually true. No one could say, like, because, one of the ideas in the self-help kind of environment is this idea that you are creating yourself. And I actually don't like that, the way that it's presented, because, it assumes a power over you as a creation that I don't think you actually have to the degree that it's sold that you have. But if you actually start with awe, like, I don't know how I am, but I can notice that I am, and I can be in awe of that, and I can appreciate the mystery of that. And wow, there's these words coming out of my mouth. How is that happening? There's these thoughts occurring, and sentences are being created. Oh my God, I don't know how that is happening, yet it is happening. And there's a certain, like, marvel at, like, wow, having that about ourselves. I mean, that is, you know, healthy, like, rather than, oh, I got all this shit I got to fix so that I can be more presentable to myself and then to others.
Yeah.
You know, does that resonate with you?
Absolutely, man. And that actually goes like what I've noticed for myself is that those moments when I feel most at peace and I feel most just, you know, at rest within myself are the moments when I have, for however brief a moment in time, I've stopped trying to grasp and make sense of and comprehend and analyze and sort out, and I just have just let go of that just for a moment and am just experiencing wonder, experiencing that beauty that you talk about, because it's a miracle. Life is such a miracle when we just pause and look at it and we go, yeah, we can explain everything from the Big Bang to you know, conception and biology and how cells split and everything else, but you can't, like, there's no way to just explain life itself. And even you talk about the idea of being a creator and how that's kind of oversold, and I so fucking agree. Like, and that's one of the things I've shared frequently about is kind of a counter response to that whole you're a powerful creator thing. No, you are a co-creator, perhaps. Yeah. But even this whole thing of you're a creator, a lot of times it's coming from this idea of self, that is still this idea of self as separate from everything else, or perhaps self as the emanator of everything else. But that really negates and ignores the fact that it is all just life. Like how am I is my thumb gonna sit there and go, I am such a powerful creator? And Pinky's over here going, yeah, so am I create things moving. And it's like, you know, we kind of work together on this, and we're all part of this body. Life, like, you don't live life. That is one of the fundamental misperceptions, if you will, is that it's not just that you are this individual living life. There's a certain amount of that, but that even you or I or self is such a fluid, is so much more fluid than we make it out to be. We think there's a solid I, and yet when we really just pause and look at it, like, life is expressing itself in an infinite number of ways. And I'm not living life. Life is living me.
Yeah.
You know, or at best, it's a combination of the two. And that's where I think that co-creator piece is. I love what you said there. It resonates really big for me.
Well, you know, a couple of things come to mind. One is a little more about this safety issue. And the other is about some of my experiences with writing music. And I know you love music as well. So starting with the first one, so the safety thing, I think one of the premises of the self-help thing, you know, that whole movement comes back to this safety issue of, like, I'm not having an experience I feel comfortable with. So, you don't feel safe. The premise is, if I could be a better self, I will get to feel safer. And we can pursue that, but in the pursuit of that, we're looking for something solid in the persona. Like, if I could create a better self, when I have that, I will feel safer. But that presumes that new self that we're creating is going to be solid enough and stay the way we want it to be, which isn't true. It's never going to be true. But there seems to be some other a sense of safety that is not based on those changeable things. like, I'm not even going to try to name it right now, but I think you can kind of like feel into what I'm saying, that there's a sense of safety, but it's not object oriented.
Yeah.
And including ourself as an object, or our personality or ourself as an object. But there is a safety that we can find within ourselves, but it can't be pinned down. And I think that's one of those things where, like, it's you can experience it. And I mean, I think one of the values that we can have for ourselves, and then also for others, is that experiential part. Like, when you can experience it and not try to pin it down into a thing, there's like, oh, there's a recognition. That. You feel it. And then in our interactions with others, we can introduce them to that feeling within themselves, kind of like, you know, how the mirror neurons operate, that they can resonate with something we're recognizing in ourselves, so they can recognize it within them, but it's not an object. And it's not like, even in the spiritual world, this idea of, okay, do 100,000 mantras, meditate upside down on your head, and, you know, do the mudras, you know, have this special diet, and then after many years of doing that, you'll get to a purified, rarefied state in which you'll be okay. But then you become object-oriented on your practice. Like, oh, I can't not do my practice because then I might not reach that goal, and I'll never ever get to be safe the way I really want to. But even if you attain the goal for a moment, like, oh, I did my practice, I had this realization, now I have to hold on to it. Like, there's still a grasping, and there's no end to the amount of grasping.
Yeah. Oh my God. That like, this brings up so many things. So, like, one of the things that I noticed for myself on my own path into spirituality and all of that was, at some point, you know, I was on this, I'd had some really profound experiences and was on this sort of this pursuit of enlightenment, pursuit of spiritual transcendence, very much of, you know, like trying to achieve that rarefied state. And at some point I had this slow realization just sink in over a period of time and a bunch of experiences that really helped me to start to shift my focus and start to realize enlightenment is let me put it this way. I was going to say enlightenment is overrated. I am overrating enlightenment, right?
Yeah,
and it's and enlightenment at this point in stage in my life, my path or whatever, I pretty much threw enlightenment on the shelf, and my pursuit in life is more about enlivenment. Like, because what I realized was that for me at least, and for many people that I see, the spiritual pursuit is actually this pursuit of transcendence, and we're trying to transcend life.
Yeah.
And maybe that is the correct path for some people. Like, if somebody is actually ready to become a Buddha, or to, you know, to actually migrate into another plane, I don't know. Maybe that is a good path for them. But in my world, for me, and what I see is on my plate now, is to learn how to embrace all aspects of myself, the spiritual aspect and this temporal aspect, and to live life fully. And then you talk about sourcing safety. It in that place that you're talking about. When we source it in, you know, when we recognize that, and we actually experience ourselves as, I don't need anything besides my breath. I've got my breath, and that's enough. Right. You know, and I can source everything I need with that. And yet, you know, coming to that place experiencing that place is in itself a journey, let alone learning how to reside in that place, which I haven't achieved in my life. So, you know, it's an experience that I've created for myself on several occasions, and I'm also very cognizant of the fact that you know, I'm in this experience with many other people, and that yes, I do get to source my own safety, but I also acknowledge the fact that, you know, I need community. I need you. I need my loved ones. I need, you know, through, I mean, we've been together through lots of ups and downs. We've separated several times, been through infidelity. We've been through all kinds of stuff. And we've learned how to not only source our own love for ourselves, but we've been a safe place for each other when we didn't know how to be that for ourselves. And you can't put a price on that, right? And so that's one of the things I think that we do get to do when we learn how to connect in ourselves. Then why not share that gift with other people? Why not be a safe place for people that you can be a safe place for a moment until they learn to source that for themselves?
Right.
You know,
well,
why not show up for each other that way?
Well, I'll tell you a really brief story about one of my teachers who was a Buddhist monk. And I met him in Los Angeles, but he was from Japan, but he had been initiated into the Buddhist path in Myanmar. And I had an opportunity to travel with him to Myanmar. But when we were there, he told this story of that he had a very deep connection with the Myanmar history because he had, you know, through his enlightenment experience, had recalled his previous lives. And life before this one, he had been a forest monk, so he was a solitary monk. And enlightenment alone. And then he had this moment. He's like, he rested in it for a while, and then he's like, so what? What now? Like he literally he plateaued there because like he attained whatever that state was, and you know, not to get into too technical a conversation around Buddhism, but they consider there are many levels of enlightenment. But so he had some kind of experience that he deemed to be enlightenment, but he was like, what the fuck is the point? And he literally just plateaued there. He didn't have any skills other than like he knew how to be a monk, and he'd been a monk for many lifetimes. But it seems like there's a lot of the old school spirituality, which is very masculine oriented in its orientation and in its goal. Because what is, I mean, I don't think we can even really have a conversation about like what is enlightenment, right? Like that would be silly. I mean, we could have that conversation, but it would be silly. But one can explore the topics around that. What drives someone to want to experience that? And in a lot of the masculine path, it actually seems to be the promise of disassociation from whatever you can't handle about life.
Yes.
And there's a very strong dissociative kind of part of that path. And there's actually a very dark history, even within Buddhism, of abuse, verbal abuse and even physical abuse that is centered on self-denial and the denial of other people's experience. And really starts to get into kind of a very dangerous, dark place. But it does center around dissociation. Like, what is the promise of enlightenment? If I'm enlightened, I won't feel pain anymore. I'll be free of all the things that are very scary about life, scary about myself, scary about my experience, scary about the things I can't control. But like when you were talking about your relationship, well, that's actually pointing to a more feminine path, if you will, in terms of qualities, which is about acknowledgement and love and connection and community, and that's a very different path, and that's actually a much more tantric path, you know. And because we are here and now, right here, we're having these experiences. We can feel our body, we can feel our breath, our heart rate. I can sense your presence, I can hear your voice. This is happening right now. I'm experiencing this, right? And like when you were talking about in a love relationship, in an intimate relationship, maybe the greatest value that we can offer each other, not just in romantic relationship, but in friendship, in community, is that safe space. I can't guarantee your experience. I can't guarantee if I love you enough that you're going to feel the way you want to, and vice versa. But I can offer you a safe space that you can be yourself. And even if I'm doing that imperfectly, having the intention of like, yeah, I want to receive you. I want to know you. I want to hear what you're feeling, what you're experiencing. Well, that is so juicy for people. And people are hungry for that. This is good stuff.
Yeah, dude, we could have a whole nother conversation on that whole, like what you just touched on, the masculinity of traditional spirituality, and the way that, you know, this an awareness that has crept in for me is how there's been sort of this really almost an evasion or ignorance, or an attempt to transcend the feminine part, the mother, right? I mean, you know, and what, like, you talk about, you didn't actually say the word, but basically what I was hearing when you were describing a lot of things is bypassing. Like there's so much bypassing that happens in this spiritual path, and because of this idea of what it's supposed to look like. And, you know, and I think we live in a world, I think, you know, like this country, America, we take pride in the fact that we founded it on this idea of the separation of church and state, right? Like that was really important to us. But why was that important to us? Is because, in my views, is because in the past, when church and state were not separated, there was total domination over the individual, because the church, religion, is this organization that governs your relationship with the father, with the masculine. And state is this organization that governs your relationship with the earth, with the mother, with life, right? With nourishment, sustenance. And so when you dominate both of those, you have total domination over the human being. And that's, you know, in the limited perspective of what's possible, like nobody really saw beyond. They never saw that it was possible to drop religion and drop church and have your own relationship that way. And in the same way, we're still struggling with the idea that you can drop the state and have your own relationship with community, with the earth, with sustenance, and create sovereignty. That's one of it's a huge value of mine. Is one of the things I'm still exploring is like, how can I create that sovereignty in that relationship? And we could go on, like, we could spend another couple hours, dude, but I know you and I both have some things that we need to get to soon, so well, we'll just throw that one out there and then save it for later.
Well, and I'll just tie a little neat knot on the story of my Buddhist teacher. What happened for him in this lifetime was he was actually, he grew up in a secular situation, and he actually was a very successful businessman until he ended up in Myanmar and became a Buddhist monk. But when he went through that process again, when he then woke up and had that enlightenment experience again, he then remembered his previous life, but then he said, okay, I'm going to answer the question, like, what now? And what he did was he has dedicated his life to charity and to helping people, and particularly in Myanmar and Sri Lanka and other parts of Southeast Asia. I mean, he works a lot with children. You know, when I was there with him, we went to a Catholic run orphanage, and he was donating money and resources. There were about 300 kids there, and it shifted from that masculine path to the feminine path of care, like, of love, of community and connection, and you know, helping people. And I think that is what we need a lot more of. It's not to do away with the masculine, but there's been such an emphasis on that to balance it out. But yeah, that's yeah, and I didn't even get into the whole thing about the music thing and creation, but you know, we'll just have to do another video. This has been awesome, and yeah, I've thoroughly enjoyed this. There's going to be a lot more of these videos that later, when this is done, we can post some links to you and your pages and any way you want to connect with people. Awesome. And we'll just keep touch. And we'll talk again soon. Okay, thank you, brother.
Really appreciate you inviting me on, and really enjoyed the conversation, and also the opportunity to just connect with you a little deeper and get a sense for what moves you and who you are. I mean, you and I have met in the past, and we've had a few interactions on Facebook since then. But it's really beautiful. It's just really appreciating who you are as a human being on a deeper level, and really enjoying it. So thank you for having me on.
Awesome. Okay, well, enough for now, and more videos to come. So thank you, everyone, for listening and watching, and we'll be seeing you again soon. Okay, take care.